Hi there guys, Bizzleberry here, support main, bringing you with a tier list of 8.22. 1 week left until the end of the season, and hopefully this tier list will push you a couple of ranks a little bit higher to get you those extra gold rewards maybe. There's been a lot of changes, and I do apologize for not bringing out a tier list for the last patch. I've been ill for quite a while, and now I finally can bring out a video, and this has been a lot of changes. I did really want to get that last tier listed as well because there have been a lot of changes, especially because of the Worlds tournament that's been happening, and it's basically made a lot of people play certain champions in solo queue, where enchanters in generally have suffered quite a bit. But let's go through the list and I'll explain why, in my opinion, some of these champions are put where they are. If you do wish to support myself and the content that I make, thumbs up and subscribing on YouTube helps as well, but if you can also visit twitch.tv/Bizzleberry and send some love over there as well, it would be super duper awesome, and I'd be very, very grateful if you can do that as well. So tier 5, bottom of the barrel champions that are very, very, very rarely played at the moment. Zoe, Maokai, Malzahar, Taric, Nautilus, Tom Kench, Sion, Ivan, Annie, and Nunu and Willump. A lot of those champions are just kind of quirky. Probably the more support-oriented ones there, the Taric, the Nautilus, and the Tom Kench ones. Basically, Taric has never recovered since being nerfed a few months ago due to the gold funneling system that was happening in mid lane, so I do not recommend you playing Taric at all. Nautilus CC is good, but during any phase, his damage is incredibly poor. The only thing I can suggest is if you really are set on playing Nautilus, play with a Kaiser. You'll give her a lot of stacks. You'll make up with the lack of damage in some aspects there. Tom Kench is a really good pick in competitive, but during solo queue, people don't use the Devour properly, the EUW. Allies keep coming out early, and then it just becomes a real mess of a champion to play, in all honesty, so I cannot recommend that either. Right, and then we've got the bottom tier 5 down. Let's go to tier 4. We've got Lulu, Vel'Koz, Zyra, Shen, Karma, Fiddle, Lux, Anivia, and Janna. We'll talk about the first two supports, the more traditional supports that are mentioned there, the Lulu and the Janna. So what's been happening in solo queue a lot over the past few weeks now, particularly because of Worlds as well, but the mid-season change also was heading towards this direction. And that's hyper carries are pretty much dead in solo queue. You can play them, but the chances of a hyper carry doing well in the solo queue game, particularly as well as you get higher, they fall off pretty quickly. Now, this is, in my opinion, due to the fact that because as more and more people are getting used to the season, games are ending quicker, so games aren't lasting generally as long as they were at the start of the season. So as the overall game ending time has been reduced month after month after month after people getting more used to the season changes and new rune builds and things like that, games are ending quicker, which means hyper carries don't get that extra 3 to 10 minutes of the game length at the end there, so they don't really get a chance of that late game, as games are ending really on average around about the 25-minute mark, and that's basically when these hyper carries start to kick in, like the Cockmore or the Vayne. Unless they get instantly fed during laning phase, like they don't really kick in because they need 3 items. They usually need Storm Razor now, and then a Zeal type based item, and then the Infinity Edge. And then when you buy all of those items, when compared to someone like a Lucian, for example, where he just needs Blade of the Ring King and a Black Cleaver, so the gold cost is much less, so they can get to their peak optimal damage quite early into the game, around about 15-20 minute mark, and that's when the games start to basically close out with the Baron popping up as well. So a lot of these enchanters are now suffering because of that. It is quite interesting and funny for me to see like how much supports are reliant on the AD carry meta as well. So enchanters, because they're so squishy right now compared to these burst AD carries, and then if you pair up with a burst AD carry with a hard engage, it's not a fun time for pretty much a lot of the enchanters and some of the mages as well. So Lulu and Janna are the best enchanters to protect a hyper carry, and since the AD carries in those picks don't really need much protection, they're kind of like sort of like dead picks right now. I mean, if you do happen to have like a Cockmore or a Vayne or someone like that, there is always a use for them, but you'll be picking them way less in solo queue because of this. So they're kind of made redundant almost right now. So we'll have to wait and see season 9 and see if there's the longer laning phases maybe might bring out the enchanters a little bit more, but we'll have to focus on that in a different video. You've also got some of the oddball mages there as well, like the Anivia, the Vel'Koz, the Xerath. They're slightly more picked in solo queue, but however, they're pretty meh. Shen could go into a tier 3. His engage is pretty good, but kind of like Nautilus, he doesn't really have that much damage. He's more about the CC and like virtually no damage at all there. So that does depend if your AD carry is doing well in the lane, because then it doesn't really matter if you do go in the Shen or not, because the person will usually die anyway. But if your AD carry isn't getting ahead, Shen becomes a really quick bad pick. So just bear that in mind if you are picking these Shen. And Karma received a Tether buff last patch. I've tried out Karma myself. She's as usual, she's decent in laning phase, but because she's like a hybrid of a mage and an enchanter, she doesn't really carry out either of her roles very well when you go to mid game onwards. Laning phase, she's very much mage, and then she tries to like move towards the enchanter route during the mid game, and it's pretty flat compared to some of the other enchanters that are higher up, so it's a bit iffy. I know she's going through a rework stage soon, so we'll have to wait for that one as well. I will be talking about that in a future video as well, the Karma rework. So we move up to tier 3. We've got Sona, Bard, Poppy, Veigar, Morgana, Zilean, and Blitzcrank. All of these champions kind of depend on the matchup quite heavily. So for example, you wouldn't want to pick Blitzcrank into a Sivir or a Morgana, as you wouldn't be able to do anything at all during the laning phase. And the same thing with like the Poppy. There's no point picking a Poppy if the enemy hasn't been taking any dashes in a team, because that's like the main thing with Poppy support, is being able to block all those dashes coming in from the enemy. So these are more of counter picks, making sure you know what the enemy has before you take these sort of champions. Morgana's here in tier 3 because she is a generally pretty safe pick. You'll see in the higher tier list there's a couple of other safe picks as well, so if you don't know anything about the enemy team comp, Morgana is one of those mage enchanter picks that can be a safe pick. Bard is an extremely difficult character to pin down, because that one, solely the Bard pick here in this tier 3 becomes individual skill. He can easily be tier 5, he can easily be tier 2. I wouldn't push it tier 1, but he has very high damage, amazing CC, but he's very squishy and very hard to play. So that one is completely based on an individual skill matchup. That's why I've averaged him out around the tier 3. If you do really want to play a high mechanical mage, I would class him as, then Bard is one of those champions that will give you a good challenging direction to head to. But this is the kind of champion where you will need to play an absolute shed ton of games to be able to carry out and learn everything to do with Bard. Now, the Veigar pick I've been quite surprised by. He has a really good cage CC ability, which can help with both sieging and defensive aspects in team fights. One thing I would say is that you will want to harass in laning phase, but bear in mind he is incredibly squishy. Do not pick Veigar against a engaged tank, otherwise you will have an incredibly bad time, as Veigar is ridiculously squishy and you will 9 times out of 10 just fail the laning phase incredibly hard. However, if you are able to take the Veigar pick into anything else, you can make it work. It's kind of like a little niche pick in that if you feel like your team does need a little bit more AP and maybe a little bit more CC as well, Veigar can provide that, but you do need to be completely aware of cooldowns and how to harass the enemy. So his execute is really good on his ulti. His stun is very good. And if you actually do somehow get to a 30 or 35 minute game, Veigar support acts as like a mid lane mage, and he is incredibly powerful. I would advise you maybe investigate going to the Glacial Augment type builds, as that will give you a little bit more CC. But he is more of in here as a pretty fun pick. I usually pick Veigar support. I genuinely do decently on him, and he's very fun to play. So he's quite good at untilting yourself and making sure that you can enjoy the game again. Moving up here to tier 2, we've got Braum, Bard, Zyra, Rakan, Alistar, Gragas, and Soraka. So you've got a lot of the hard engaged champions here. The main ones there being the Rakan, Alistar, and the Gragas. Got a couple of AP mages there as well. And you got Braum and Soraka as well. So let's talk about the AP mages first. So Brand and Zyra, the two strongest mages in the game right now. So if your team has basically taken full AD and you need to take something for the AP role, Brand and Zyra I highly recommend. Pretty easy champions to play. The main two differences between them is that Brand gives more damage, Zyra gives more utility. So just pay attention to see which one your team needs more and choose accordingly. Brand also does slightly more damage on neutral objectives as well because of his passive, but also Zyra provides a little bit more sustain during those neutral objectives as well with her plants. So they each bring something slightly unique to the table, but they're both very good. So in terms of AP mages, so they are very, very good in laning phase in general as well. So if that's something more that you're looking at is focusing more of yourself carrying the game, then I highly recommend the Brand of Zyra, and even the Veigar pick as well is pretty good too. But the Brand and Zyra are the ones that stand out the most. Now, in terms of the safe pick, as we were talking about earlier on the Morgana, Braum is probably the best safe pick you can pick in the entire game right now. And also Lucian's a fairly common pick as well, so denying that from the enemy team, a Braum-Lucian combo can be nice. And also Braum beats the Zyra combo as well, as Zyra can't get feathers through the Braum wall. So there are a bunch of things here to bear in mind when you are picking Braum, but like he is like the safest pick you could pick. Pretty hard to kill. Protects you, whatever AD carry that you take as well. So in general, he's a pretty solid champion to play as a safe pick, but he isn't particularly anything like amazing in terms of being able to solo outplay the enemy. His skill shots are very basic, but he has a lot of protection. Soraka is probably one of the safest and annoying enchanters that you can take in the game. Her sustain throughout the entire game, even with her ulti, is still very good, and there are still times when the enemy won't buy executioners, Morellonomicon, etc. So Soraka is still a decent pick. It's just that she will be a little bit squishy against some of the hard engages, but if you do take barrier on her, you can have a chance of out-sustaining and outplaying against the hard engages, which are champions like the Rakan, the Alistar, and the Gragas. Now, I've moved Gragas up. I feel like he actually might be like hidden quite strong right now. I have a lot of Gragas in my history. Back in Season 1, Season 2, I used to play him a lot as a mid laner, so I know a lot of the tricks on the Gragas anyway. So I've been playing him in solo queue, and his individual damage is actually probably the highest out of all the engaged supports, and also he has some of the most unique abilities in the entire game. The main one being his ultimate, the dispersing the entire team. In team fights, that's actually extremely disruptive, and also that interrupts channeled abilities as well. He does struggle the first couple of levels during laning phase, and his Q barrel will not do a lot of damage. You'll be maxing your E first into your W. But his body slam damage and his W auto attack damage is actually super good. Just don't get caught out though by the lack of damage from your ulti and your Q, as you won't be taking much or any AP. So as long as you bear that in mind and rely everything around your E and your W in terms of damage, then he's actually a pretty legit champion, and I've been enjoying playing him. Other common picks as well are the Rakan and the Alistar. One thing I'll say about the Rakan is only pick Rakan if you have AoE in your team, and also bear in mind he is incredibly squishy in lane. So if you do make one mistake going in with your W, you could be heavily punished there and you will easily die. I mean, Rakan is a hard engaged champion, but he is as squishy as an enchanter. So please bear that in mind when you are playing the champion. His ulti is extremely powerful against assassins mid game, but once again, don't get too cocky as you are incredibly squishy. Alistar is kind of like the opposite to Rakan. Alistar's laning phase can be absolutely amazing. However, as you get through to the mid and the late game, Alistar feels extremely extremely meh to play. You got the one combo and then you're like trying to run around and getting a stun stack, and then you're left finding yourself doing nothing for quite a long time. So in terms of Alistar is really good during laning phase, and you need to make sure you take advantage of that and start getting your team ahead for those objectives early, because if you don't, you're going to be incredibly meh for the entirety of the game. So please bear that in mind. All right, now we're going to the tier 1, the big picks that I'm sure you're all curious about. In my list, I have the Pyke, Leona, Thresh, and Nami at tier 1. So as you may have seen if you're following these tier lists, champions have been changed quite a bit between tier 1 and tier 3. Pyke and Nami, though, have been tier 1 for most of the season. Pyke has received a lot of changes this patch, so I'm going to leave him till last and we'll talk about the other 3. So Leona is the easiest tank to play right now. She counters every enchanter due to the fact that she can just get onto them and lock them down, especially level 6, and because of their low base HP, she can get them killed incredibly quickly. Bear in mind, if you are going to be playing a hard engaged tank, try and always pick it with a burst AD carry, like a Lucian or a Zyra or something along those lines. Otherwise you will be lacking damage and you won't be able to engage in the laning phase. The Thresh have moved up to tier 1. Thresh is quite high mechanical, like the Pyke. So if you are scared of mechanics, I would suggest you go towards the Leona pick. However, Thresh it's harder to catch out people compared to Leona, as Leona can just use her E through the wave and then just jump onto the target that way, whereas Thresh has to play around minions. However, Thresh has more tools at his disposal to disrupt the enemy team, such as a good Flay can stop a Alistar coming in with a headbutt, various things that you can do with Flay, like stopping the Tristana jump from happening, and various other dashes as well. And hooks are obviously generally pretty good, and you've got a lantern as well to save teammates if they choose to click on it. Pray to Orange Jesus that they do click on it. Or even when you send them out to your jungler as well, hopefully the jungler will click on it as well and help apply gank pressure down onto your bot lane. I still believe Nami is the best enchanter in the game now. Picking Nami is difficult, but when you get the right circumstances, when you know, for example, what the enemy support is going to be in particular, so you're not against a hard engage, Nami can be a very, very strong pick. Her heals are very strong with Unholy Grail, has decent amounts of CC you can use aggressively or defensively, and her E is a good catch-out mechanic as well and gives your AD carry a little bit extra damage as well. Laning phase sustain is pretty high, mid-game sustain is pretty burst, with the burst heal with the Unholy Grail is pretty strong as well, and it also gives you the Ardent Censer pathway as well if needed as well. Like someone like a Lucian won't necessarily benefit from the Ardent Censer, but you might have a jungler or a top laner that may need it as well. So it gives you a little bit of a few other options there as well. But I'd always recommend to go Unholy Grail first. Now finally, Pyke. Pyke had a massive adjust, shall we say. If you've been going Frozen Heart Pyke, I'd probably tell you, well, if you asked me last week, I'd tell you to not do it. And if I'm telling you right now about Frozen Heart Pyke, you've got to stop. The Lethality is now a big core part of Pyke now. Basically, they've made it so that Lethality will now scale increase the stun duration, the speed on your W, and the ult damage as well. I would still recommend going my build though, where if you get enough gold to buy a BF sword, you should buy it because you're going to need a GA at some point. But you'll be picking Lethality, you'll be going towards Duscar, and then choosing between Edge of Night and Yumumus. You probably would want to take the Yumumus for the speed. And in all honesty, Edge of Night is kind of you can take it, but it's kind of dependent on how much instant CC are on the other team, to be honest, as the Banshees can only have so much use. But I'm looking forward to these changes. I think overall it should be a minor buff and a decent buff if you already have experience on playing the aggressive Pyke. If you have experience playing Frozen Heart tanky Pyke, it's going to take a little bit of use to, because you aren't already used to how you should be playing fights as a proper assassin Pyke. It's going to be a slight extra learning curve for you, as you won't be relying as much on resistances. However, if you do start getting the ball rolling early and able to stack up the lethality up higher and higher and higher with the sudden impact rune as well to give you more penetration as well, I'm just very excited. I'm very, very excited. Expect Pyke to be banned a lot though. Pyke has always been pretty strong in solo queue, and now honestly I see this as a buff to myself. I think he is probably, if I had a tier 0, a tier 1, I probably would put Pyke up, maybe even just above the Leona, the Thresh, and the Nami, just because he has this most solo individual carry potential as a support main, and this should be something that you should be really excited about if you are a support main and you are wanting to carry games more based on yourself rather than having to rely a little bit more on your AD carry or your solo laners. The damage should be really high, stun duration should be really good, even early, and you have the potential to increase your W speed as well, further from what the base amount was as well, because you'll be leveling your W last. So that already scaling with lethality is already pretty exciting as well. Just bear in mind, Pyke's always been kind of weak the first few levels during laning phase, and now he might be even weaker. But if you can survive that first few levels of the laning phase, you should have a decent game in your hands. Hopefully this tier list helps you. That wraps up 8.22. I'll be working on more support guide content for the coming weeks and making videos on preseason. So I hope you guys are subscribed so you get updated on that content as well. And if you do want to watch me live streaming, I am live on twitch.tv/Bizzleberry every day, 6 PM UK time. Hope you guys find this helpful and good luck. Got 1 week to go. Goodbye.